Okay, we're looking at Renaissance and Reformation, and this is going to be part 4, and this is going to cover the Reformation. So the Protestant Reformation, the spirit of inquiry, or inquiring different things that came about during the Renaissance, as well as the knowledge of widespread corruption of the church, led to new challenges to the Pope's authority. So what had happened with the church corruption? So many had entered into the clergy to gain power and wealth rather than for religious purposes. They were there to make money and to be in control. So they held more church positions than they could properly fulfill. So they would take as many positions as they possibly could, make more money, own more land, and really not service the people at all. So they had secret spouses, or they had secret children, which was not allowed, of course. And the Pope and the members of the church hierarchy acted more like secular princes than spiritual leaders. So they were there again, they were acting more like kings than they were religious figures. So people like Erasmus, which we had seen earlier on in part 3 in Holland, and Sir Thomas More of England sought to reform the Catholic Church, but church leaders were too slow to respond. So these two guys knew what was coming, but the main church officials said, no, we don't need to reform anything. And that's when Martin Luther comes along. So Luther and his ideas. So in the early 16th century, the Catholic Church had fallen into the practice of selling indulgences, which is a pardon from punishment. So a pardon from sin, a pardon from committing a sin, and allowing the sinner to enter into heaven as long as you paid. So this practice brought a great deal of revenue into the church, and the Pope was using the money from the sale of the indulgences to build St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. So they're collecting money as to wipe away sins is what they're doing. So Martin Luther, who was an Augustin monk, in 1517, Luther posted the 95 Theses. This is a statement. So this had 95 different things on there why the church is doing wrong at the time. So he posted these statements on a church door in Germany, and his thesis challenged the Pope's right to sell indulgences. So Luther believed that neither priests nor the Pope had special powers to provide salvation to individuals. So as a Pope or a priest, you could guide someone, but you couldn't just say, okay, you're going into heaven. So Luther concluded that only through faith in God could a person be saved and go to heaven. So he believed that each individual must read and understand the Bible for himself or herself to achieve this faith. And this comes from the Gutenberg Press. Now you have enough Bibles to where people could actually read the Bible themselves, understand it for themselves, come up with their own ideas, and this would lead them to heaven instead of just going to church and being told what to think. So because of his writings, the Pope excommunicated Luther, which means he expelled him from the church. If you get expelled from the church back then, you could not go to heaven. So in defiance, he publicly burned the Pope's decrees. In other words, the letters that were sent to him. So Luther was next summoned to appear before Charles V, who was the Holy Roman Emperor at that time, and the representatives of the German states at the city of Worms. And when Luther refused to recant what he had actually said at this meeting, which was called a diet. Okay, so the Diet of Worms, it just means the Assembly of Worms. Charles V banned him as an outlaw. So Luther got protection from several German princes. Remember, we talked about some of these kings wanted land, wanted to be able to tax, and wanted control over priests. So some of these German princes sided with Luther, and they wanted to help him succeed. So he appealed to their feelings of German patriotism against sending money back to Italy. Okay, so why not just keep that church money here in Germany? So Luther responded to the Pope's condemnation by establishing a brand new church. So breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church and starting what's called the Lutheran Church. He felt believers did not need special priests, and each person could read the Bible on his own, on his or her own. So Luther translated the New Testament into German and a number of pamphlets to persuade others. So here again, the Gutenberg Press, very, very important. So the reformers became known as Protestants. Okay, many German princes adopted Protestantism. They also used this as an opportunity, here it is, to seize church lands and to close monasteries. When German peasants rebelled against what was going on, so you're really getting rid of the peasants' Roman Catholic Church, and they didn't like it. So they rebelled against the German princes. Luther sided with the princes instead of the common person. And he had attacked the Pope, but he had supported similar secular ideas that the princes had. So it was kind of a strange situation that he ends up in. And then reformers later on. So Gutenberg's invention of the movable type also helped Luther and his followers spread their ideas throughout Europe, and this causes other people to want to do the same thing. So some of the other reformers that followed Luther's lead, you had John Calvin, who started a new Protestant church in Geneva. Calvin reasoned that since God was all-knowing, it was predestined, already decided by God who would be saved and who would be damned. So while faith was key to salvation, it was God who gave faith to some and denied faith to others. So he believed that pretty much when you're born, God knows who's going to go to heaven, who's not going to go to heaven, and he gives faith to those that he's going to bring to heaven with him. So only the elect would be saved. So only this certain group of people would be saved. So Calvinists encouraged hard work and a strict moral code, and they saw worldly success as a sign of God's favor. So they saw that if you did well on earth, you were in God's favor. And there's a lot of churches that believe that today too also. So what do you think the position of the Catholic Church in Western Europe would have remained unchallenged if the Pope had not decided to sell indulgences? So, we had talked about earlier in the chapter that there's a lot of stuff going against the church. A lot of people are starting to question the church. So even if they weren't selling indulgences, they probably would have been in trouble. There probably would have been a split in the Roman Catholic Church in Europe anyways. So the Catholic Counter-Reformation. So these are people pushing back against the Reformation, pushing back against this establishment of this new Protestant church. So as Protestantism swept across many parts of Europe, the Catholic Church reacted by making limited reforms, which they had been asked to do before, and then curbing their earlier abuses, so getting rid of some of the things they were doing wrong. This movement is known as the Counter-Reformation. And the big part of the Counter-Reformation is the Council of Trent, and the church redefined Catholic beliefs and ended the sales of indulgences. So the church also banned Protestant books, and it established the Inquisition. So they're going to go out and really kind of clean up what they think is, not the right church. So they're going to, the Inquisition is questioning people on their faith, really is what it is. So the Inquisition is a court whose purpose was to punish heretics, those who denied what the church was actually teaching. So anything against church teachings after the Counter-Reformation, these people are brought into the Inquisition. So the political impact of the Reformation, under the leadership of the Pope and with the support of the Holy Roman Empire, Catholics checked any further spread of Protestantism and even won some areas back. So they stopped this growing movement of going against the Roman Catholic Church and becoming Protestants. So France, Italy, Spain, and southern Germany remained Catholic. France, Spain, Italy, all these areas in the southern part of Germany and places like that, they remain Catholic. Northern Germany, Holland, Scandinavia, they all become Protestant, so your gray areas. And at first, England remained Catholic. However, when the Pope refused Henry VIII's demand for a divorce from his Spanish wife, so in the Roman Catholic religion, especially at that time, you are not allowed to divorce. Henry VIII asked if he could divorce his Spanish wife, and the Roman Catholic Church said no. So Henry broke away from the Catholic Church, and he turned to Protestantism. Henry closed the English monasteries, seized all the church land, and he declared himself head of the English church in what was called the Act of Supremacy in 1534. So he does something that kings are kind of do later on. So he He gets rid of the Roman Catholic Church, brings in Protestantism, and he says he's in charge of the Church of England. So this is kind of the division of Europe at that time, and it really kind of gets messed up. But your green areas, even some in the background here, there are people that are Catholics, the Lutherans, Calvinists, Anglicans, all these up here at the top, those are all going to be your Protestant religions. And then you also had Eastern Orthodox, which was in Russia, and your old Ottoman Empire. Remember, that was the Byzantine Empire. And then you start to have Islam come up in through places like Turkey and even into southern Eastern Europe. So it's kind of divided in a lot of different ways. So religious wars between Catholics and Protestants began in the 1520s and lasted for more than a century. During the 30 Years' War from 1618 to 1648, as many as 1/3 of the German population was killed during these wars between Catholics and Protestants. So the Reformation tended to strengthen the power of secular rulers. So the Reformation caused kings to become even more powerful. In Protestant countries, people no longer had an allegiance to the Pope. Protestant countries, the secular ruler became the highest authority. So in places like England, the king becomes the most important person, not the Pope anymore. Queen Elizabeth I of England was a good example of a strong secular ruler. Although a woman, she won the loyalty and affection of her subjects, and Elizabeth maintained a moderate form of Protestantism and defended England from attacks from Catholic Spain. In your Catholic countries, the church gave more power to secular rulers to help them fight the Protestants. So the church started to give up some of their power to the kings because the kings had armies, and those Catholic kings would go and fight against the Protestants. And here's a painting of the time, pretty sad time. Two Christian groups actually fighting each other. So the artistic and economic impact of the Reformation. Art during the Reformation, Catholic art, same thing. So Roman Catholic art is going to stay the same. It's going to be of Jesus, of Mary, and the saints. Protestant art actually kind of goes against all those ideas of icons and things like that. So they specialize in landscapes, just like what we see over here on the right, and still life scenes. And it was more secular subjects. And Reformation artists could also glorify God by painting the natural beauty of the land that God had created. So they could paint these landscapes and say God is still in these landscapes. And then economy. The weakening of the papal authority may have also stimulated growth in Northern Europe, where the church no longer collected taxes. So if you're not collecting taxes, people had more money to spend. And so it kind of encouraged the economy in those areas where the Roman Catholic Church had gone away. So religious wars resulted in widespread destruction, but also stimulated economies by creating a need for new goods, which is what war always